planning system is stopping paddle in the UK.
Why is paddle so popular?
It could probably work, anywhere. From a mental health point of view, paddle is enormous.
Why would anyone ever want to build a paddle court with that amount of risk?
4-court scheme will cost.
Hayden Small, National Acquisition Director at Pure Padel Clubs. Let's start at the beginning. What does a day in the life of your job actually look like?
The main thrust of my job is to find new clubs and expand the company as quickly as we can. We've got a fairly rigid brief, which is trying to find up to 10 clubs a year. So that proves to be a challenge because there's lots of moving parts in trying to make that happen. We have a weekly planning call, but that filters into a daily action. So there's always planning application actions that we have to work on. There's just lots of moving parts, which all positive stuff, but it's obviously just trying to coordinate those kind of moving parts to best effect, which it can be a bit of a challenge.
I was going to say, with all those moving parts and so many different points at which a deal can fall through, what is usually the stage that most deals die at?
Because planning can take anything from 6 months to 2 years. And we opened a site in Surrey last month, and that took 2 years to get from start to finish. So, and a lot of money to fund that.
Bit of a lottery.
It is really, and it shouldn't be, because we approach every application, properly. We fund them properly, and we throw the kitchen sink at all the information they need. But unfortunately, the councils just can't react, and they can't manage the caseload. And invariably, we can get refusal, mainly because the council don't quite understand the information we're sending them, which is pretty, it's a shame. But we've missed out on a couple where the information's gone in that they just don't digest properly.
I know that before Pure Padel there was Power League, and you were trying to build Birmingham's first paddle court round there, but you've said that was quite a challenge. So what were the main points of friction that you found throughout that process, and how did that shape you into the operator that you've now become?
Because it's such a new concept, if you go out to the market and ask for or try and find experience, there's not much there. Contractors haven't really built them before in this country, courts that is. So the Power League experience was an interesting one because it was in the middle of Birmingham in Aston. You'd probably say, with all due respect to how paddle taps into demographics at the moment, that's probably not the demographic that you'd aim for a brand new first time paddle centre, because it is very industrial as well. But the challenge there was, I suppose, getting people playing. But to be frank, when we built, as soon as we built them, the uptake was enormous. We priced it really well. And we ended up thinking, if it can work in a very heavy industrial location like Aston, it could probably work, anywhere. And that generally comes back to the commercials. You model it in a way, not of the numbers you're going to achieve now, but maybe in 3 to 5 years, if you know what I mean, because it will plateau, and we got to make sure we got the commercial kind of metric right at the start, just to be safe, really.
I suppose it's so interesting that in 3 to 5 years you think that there'll be this plateau, but why has there been such a huge uptake in paddle to begin with? Why is paddle so popular?
It's a new sport, for one, which always gets people's interest. It's something different to do. From a mental health point of view, paddle is enormous. I mean, there's been scientific fact proven that when you play a game of paddle, the stimulus mentally is huge. You burn 700 calories when you play a game of paddle, which is another great part of the game.
With what you're trying to do, I really connect with, and I suppose Mill Street does as well, your philosophy on bringing life into these buildings. And Nottingham bus depot example is one of them, where you still preserved all the history around it as well. But are you essentially, throughout all of this, solving the death of the high street problem that we're still going through, but reinvigorating it with a sense of leisure?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the space we're trying to find is both indoor, outdoor. What we're trying to I suppose, emulate is some kind of social impact in a location. The Nottingham one's an interesting one because you're slap bang in the middle of Nottingham city centre by the train station. It was a knackered old bus depot, and you know we have about, I'd say about 500 customers a day going in and out of the venue, and at weekends it's really busy. But it's created a community kind of hub, which I think, if you've got high streets that are struggling, a lot of the high street stores can be big units as well. So if you can convert some of those into leisure, I suppose it just improves footfall, and it gives the retailer or the anchor landlord another string to their bow, because they're offering sport, leisure, which ultimately gets people into centres and the location.
It's such a conundrum because paddle is something that's, everyone see it as such high demand, but you've got to put in so much capital in order to get there. It's such a risk. Why would anyone ever want to build a paddle court with that amount of risk?
Well, it is a risk, and the capital is, it's getting slightly eye-watering on what you would imagine, but the returns are really good, primarily because there's not enough courts. As soon as you open a venue, we track at about 86% occupancy. So, you can only book a court 2 weeks out. So as soon as you are able to book a court, we're not full, but we're not far off. We kind of gauge it on a 50% occupancy, and if the project works on that basis, that's when we'll move it forward. If it doesn't, then we won't. A four-court scheme will cost you about £1 million, if you're going to put a canopy on top of it. So, with that kind of investment, you've got to be clear on your location, obviously what you're building, and you've just got to make sure that you can't future-proof it, but you can definitely model it in a fairly cautious way. It's
interesting what you say. You look at getting your money back in about 3 to 5 years, but you also say you can't predict past 3 years.
No.
So where does the business case lie if you're expecting to get your money back, but you can't actually be guaranteed that because of the way the paddle's going?
You've got to be really quite brutal about the figures you think you're going to achieve. And, if an investor wants to get in and out within 5 years, I think they can at the moment. But in 3-4 years' time, you'd probably say it might be a different kind of landscape then. So there's no logic to us at the moment being overly cautious. We just have to take a fairly honest view about where we think it's going. It is fabulous. The only thing stopping the explosion, I think, is planning. The planning system is stopping paddle in the UK just exploding exponentially. If everyone wasn't up against the same thing, I think you'd have 5,000 courts probably by next year. But you just cannot get them through the planning system.
What can I say? UK planning permission sucks.
Well, it does, unfortunately. There's no other word for it.
No. Hayden, thank you so much for your time. I think you really summarised it in that investing in paddle is just brave. Yeah. And I think what Pure Paddel's got so right is the process that you've got in place to check if certain boxes need to be ticked. So the investment is sensible. It's not a finger in the air. And that's music to my ears, genuinely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll invite you to the Warwick Centre when it opens.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you.